Dom, first of all, I mean, back to another fight. How are you feeling as we're just a couple of days out?
I'm hungry, but I'm good. I'm on point. I'm on track.
Are the weight cuts getting harder the older you get, and perhaps even the more infrequently you're able to fight?
No, actually, this one was really easy. You never know. Each camp's different. It really is. But this one has been very good to me.
I think when this fight was announced, it came as a bit of a surprise to some people because I know prior to the Cejudo fight, you kind of really wanted a top-level opponent to step back in there against. And against Casey, while he's a young prospect, he's not quite at that level you'd previously wanted to be linked to. What was it about this fight that made you say yes?
Well, I never really mentioned anything about being linked to a certain status, but I don't know really what status he is or isn't to you. That would be an interpretation by you. But to me, Casey Kenny is one of the best in the world.
What is it about him that makes him that good?
Well, he's well-rounded. He's a black belt in judo. He comes from a grappling background. He trains with John Crouch out in Arizona. And he started with his grappling, then added the judo and stuff with it. And then as he's improved, he's on a 3-fight win streak, and his striking has been improving too. He just beat Nathaniel Wood, who has a good striking base first. So coming from a grappling background and beating a striker, he's improving in that aspect as well.
He was out here earlier and he was complimentary of you, said he grew up watching you and respected you, but he did say he didn't think he'd seen much advances from yourself in your game over the past 5 years perhaps. Do you disagree?
Again, that would be his interpretation, and he's allowed to have it.
He also mentioned that while he didn't want to give much tactics away, he did look at the Cejudo fight. Cejudo had a bit of success with some leg kicks in that fight, and he said it would be almost ridiculous for him to not take something from that. Have you had to change anything in your training, or do you think Cejudo wasn't having as much success as it could be interpreted from viewing it?
Yeah, I mean, they attacked the legs early, and you have to adjust. And when the adjustment was made in the second round, you know, there was a third round coming with the second left. It got stopped. So, you know, you might have seen the adjustment be made in the third round. But for them to say that they watched the fight and they got a read on the leg kicks, okay, that's okay with me.
If I recall correctly, I was there in Jacksonville, and I think after the fight you did an interview where you said that you should have perhaps been a little bit more aggressive earlier in the first round. It took you a little bit of time just to sort of get into your rhythm. In training, is that something you've had to work on in sparring where you have to come out more aggressively, or do you think that's just a lesson you learned from that fight and you'll be able to apply that instantly in the next one? Well,
realistically, it's hard to say all this stuff because it sounds like an excuse, but it's not. It's just answering your question. I had about 12 sparring sessions leading into that fight. Henry had, 3 months to prepare. It was supposed to be Aldo. They shut down the borders, so I got an opportunity on 6 weeks' notice after a 3.5-year layoff. I sparred, like I said, a handful of times before that, so I didn't have a lot of rounds under my belt. That was part of it. The other part of it is this is a completely new setup leading into a fight. I come from the days where it's just you show up to one room, you warm up for about 2-3 hours sometimes. You're just kind of hurrying up and waiting. You're sitting there actually for a while before you go out to your fight, and waiting for all these fights after fight after fight, and you have plenty of time to warm up. In Jacksonville, they put us in a room at the hotel, and that was actually the warm-up room. The warm-up room was not at the Coliseum or whatever you call it, and I didn't really make that read because I'd never been in a COVID situation before. It was the first athletic event in a lockdown situation. So I was kind of taking it on a whim, and I did not warm up the way I normally warm up for 25 fights, 23 plus fights. I did not warm up. So I didn't get the warm up I needed, and the adjustment is to make sure I get the warm up I needed. Since I was a kid, the coach always says you should be walking out, like you already had your first match when you start the match. I'll be able to do that this time. I'll be prepared, and I'll be warmed up. And I think that's the key to starting fast in the first round.
I know that you say these aren't making excuses, and I'm not accusing you of that. You did allude to, there was a second of the second round. It got taken off you. Have you had any conversations with the commission to perhaps avoid having Keith Peterson refereeing your fight?
Yeah, I made the request, and you hope that the commission can honor your request. But when it all comes down to it, they run things, right? They have control over everything. Mark Ratner alluded that he was able to make that possible for me. And it's not that I, hate this guy or anything. This is a business thing, and I did not feel like he was doing his job. So there's plenty of refs. I've never had an issue with any other ref in the history of my career before the fight started. I had a situation with him before the fight started in the locker room. So that's what makes me stand by the fact that I'd prefer another ref.
I'm surprised that someone has to sort of get that done for you. I would feel like as a fighter, you should be able to say, I feel uncomfortable. Maybe not, I'm more comfortable with this guy, but you should be able to say to the commission, I'm uncomfortable with this particular person. Can we have a different one? And I feel like they should just oblige that request. I'm surprised that it's a process that they can turn down.
It's a very good point. I mean, there's a lot of things in life that we don't have control over. Pretty soon you're going to have to take a vaccine to travel in a lot of people's lives. We have no control over that either. So there's a lot of things that are shifting in the world that we don't have control over. You can just do your best to trust the process and hope that surrender to the things you don't have control over. When it comes to the commission, each commission in every single various state has their own set of rules. You can only reach out to each commission and hope that they hear you. But when it comes down to it, they run the show. We really, as fighters, we don't really have much we can do. They're a separate entity from USADA. They're a separate entity from the UFC, and they're a separate entity from every other state, each commission. So you just cross your fingers with each commission and their rules.
And last one from me, I'd just love to get your take on it. Your analytical brain is so well known. This main event on Saturday night, it looks like it could be a classic. How do you see Israel versus Jan going down?
I mean, these guys are two top contenders. You can't take anything away from them. They're pretty awesome to watch. Aljamain Sterling has made leaps and bounds of his own adjustments in his career, and that comes from, after losses, making adjustments and showing up different. Peter Yan has shown to be able to switch stance, and after losing a round against Aldo, getting his leg chopped down, he was able to switch to southpaw and finish on Aldo, which is a pretty amazing adjustment. So I look forward to watching the two competitors, and I'm more looking forward to me getting in there and doing my job.
Right here. Given yours and Casey's connections to Tucson, did you ever have any interactions with him before he got into the UFC?
I've seen him one other time at another event in Tucson, and it was peaceful. There's no issues.
What did you make of his last performance against Nathaniel Wood? Were you impressed with the fight? Like, after that fight, did you view him as a possible next opponent?
I don't really make these, like, I don't know. I mean, you hear a lot of guys like, I choose that. Sure. After my last fight, I just got. It forces you to get right back to focusing on yourself, staying present with you, and making your own adjustments after a loss. And then I've lost 2 title fights in a row right now, so I wasn't really looking at any specific opponent for any specific thing, because when you're losing, it's kind of like just kind of get in there, right? I mean, why go too far ahead? So Sean Shelby gave me a guy on a winning streak, and am I going to argue with the matchmaker? I'm just going to, after my last, I got an opportunity in that title fight. It did not get executed the way I wanted. I felt very gifted and honored to get that opportunity to fight for the title. So after that gift, just show up, do your job, take the fight that's given to you, shut up, and go.
Did it matter at all to be on this card specifically, given there are a few other bantamweight fights and you can kind of all be on the same timeline moving forward? Or was it just timing it happened to be on this card?
Yeah, it was just timing. I just wanted to fight in the States was my main objective. I prefer to not fight out of the country, especially in a time like this.
Are you happy it's 3 rounds rather than a 5-round preparation?
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You'll hear that from all fighters. It allows a sprint pace, so I can keep a different type of pace. It allows, it just changes the pace of the fight realistically. 15 minutes, it's only 15 minutes of fighting. I mean, it's not that bad.
And then looking at the title fight, the bantamweight title fight, Aljamain said that Jan has to beat him to legitimize himself as the champion, because his quote was he beat up 2 old men in his last 2 fights. And to be a legitimate champ, he has to be a young lion like himself. Do you agree with that assessment of Peter Yan having to beat Aljamain to become a legitimate champion?
I I believe you have to defend the title. Has he defended the title? I mean, I don't think that there's one to become a legitimate champion. I can just say this, as a champion who's had the belt, defended it, and had it for a very long period of time, and at one point I cleaned out the division, being I faced everybody in the top 5 and had beaten them. That's not easy to do. And when you can do something like that, Usman's done it. John Jones has done it. There's a handful of fighters who've done that. It has been done. It doesn't make you a legitimate champion, but that's the real answer to stuff, is how can you win the belt and defend it multiple times, more than once even sometimes. You know, I defended it once after I won it from TJ even, and you know, so you got to defend the belt. I do believe that, but winning the belt isn't, anybody's pretty close to winning that belt in the top 15, in my opinion. We really are. I've fought guys that, when I was at the top with the belt, I've fought guys that were number 15 just 1 year before, and they won 3 fights in a row, and sometimes you can win 1 or 2 fights depending on if it's in a spectacular fashion, and get right up to title contention. So when you look at rankings, if I'm being perfectly honest, rankings has to do with the money you're paid more than where you're actually legitimized. So what is a ranking to a fighter?
Dom, back here. Just at this stage in your career, do you have any specific goals right now, or is it just, going fight by fight?
Yeah, fight by fight, man. You have to stay in the present moment. When you start moving to the future, things start getting ugly.
Fair enough. And I know that recently you started a footwork tutorial of sorts. Just like, what was the inspiration behind putting that together?
I think it's important for, everybody, the sport, to always be giving back to it. I started in this thing when it was illegal in a lot of states. We were called by John McCain human cockfighters. Like, that's what they called us. Like, that's insane to me that I was fighting during that time. And you had to, I'm fighting guys I'm training with guys that are getting off their lunch break at Lowe's Home Improvement and training with me to get ready for fights. I have to line up 5 guys in all different aspects and try to figure out a way to prepare for my fight. It's a different era. So it's just crazy to watch how everything's changed.
And as for this fight with Kenny, do you feel like any additional pressure at all, going against somebody who's unranked for once?
Like I said about the rankings, like, it's about pay. If he was getting paid more, he'd be ranked. Facts. That's a fact.
And, one of your former teammates, Takumi Tamaru, he's making his big promotional debut in Ryzen 27 in 2 weeks. Just, having trained with him and your analytical mind, just what do you make of him as a prospect and how far he can go in the sport?
Well, anybody that I've trained with so many people, man, and a lot of Japanese fighters. I've trained with Chinese fighters. I've trained with people from Thailand. Like, when I train with guys, you're just beating the crap out of each other, and you're in training with all the gear on, and you never know what day they come on. Did they miss wrestling day before sparring day? If they did, then they're a little bit more fresh. It's hard to tell, to be perfectly honest, but the guys that I train with that prepare me for my fights are the ones that really stick with me, because they're part of the journey that helps me get to where I need to be, So I have all the best for everybody I train with, because I've never had ill wills with any of them. And I respect all the fighters out there, because this is a tough sport. So every one of these fighters I respect. I hope the best for them.
Of course. Well, happy early birthday, Dom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dominick, over here on your left. Hi. Out of Alliance, you've had a lot of men and women who've made it onto broadcast teams, not just UFC, but Goito, Tonga, other promotions. I mean, are you the one just giving everybody advice that they've made it, or is it just this special group that you guys have just done really well on television?
I've thought about that too. I think what happens is, especially with Goito, especially with Tonga, with Angela Hill, I would give them, like, I do a show called Unlocking Victory that all of you guys have probably seen on ESPN. Tune in. I brought her on. I brought Goito on. I bring these people on so that because they're people that can work with me. And once they do that, I think that they get a taste of like, wow, this is it. I see what it is. There's a camera in front of me. And once they feel it, then you start getting the idea, like, I can do this too. I'm not going to say that I give them advice. If they ask, I'll talk to them. I'll give them some support. But Tonga did it all on his own. I never said a word. I might inspire them a little to say I can do this because they know me personally, and I'm just a normal guy like them. And they're like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. But that's what I've been saying since day one with everything, fighting too.
There are a lot of fighters, obviously they see that spot in the broadcast booth at the desk with you guys. I mean, just what would be your advice for these fighters who are coming up right now and like, you know what, I want to have that for my career when I'm done with this?
I didn't really have that as an idea, to be honest. I got into that because I got hurt a lot, which was not something that I ever thought was going to be part of my story, but it is. So I would say I turned lemons into lemonade, really, in order to get that position. And I did a lot of work. I worked with Zach Candido, who gave me an opportunity early on. I'm very appreciative for him because he got me studied very early in Cejudo fights, which I would drive 3 hours up to LA in this little tiny room, and I would be calling these fights where I would literally have a fight card 3 days before the fight, and the entire fight card would change the day of the fight. People would be leaving and coming and leaving and going, and you're talking about you're speaking a bunch of Portuguese names in Brazil with a bunch of guys that aren't the most known fighters in the world, to be honest. And it was difficult and it was hard. And he built me up. Zach Candido gave me opportunities to build me up and learn there. And step by step, not to mention Fox Sports early on before we went with ESPN, gave me a lot of opportunities there too. So it was a learning process. They didn't just throw me in the booth by any means. This has been a lot of work that people don't know about. I've been broadcasting on TV and doing this stuff for about, 7 years, maybe more. I haven't really kept complete track, but a long time I've been doing it. So to just get there and sit next to Rogan and sit next to these people they didn't just say, oh, Dominick, you won a world title, let's shove you in there. It had nothing to do with that. I had to learn the game. And then the advice that I would say, if you really want to be in TV, do it for the fighter, not for yourself. Be there in support of others. I am part of we, but we is not part of I. If I'm up there just talking about myself and wanting to hear myself talk and be cool and look cool and make jokes and be the famous guy, from my own experience, I can only say that, that's not for the fighter. Who's that supporting? That's supporting yourself. But if you're in that position and you're studying the film and you're watching these fighters and you have real admiration for each one of these fighters, like the nerd I am, that I am a fan of the sport. I'm a fan of the movements. To me, it's like a puzzle that needs to be solved, and everybody fits together in a certain way with each style. When you can come from that and give respect to each fighter, whether they're, as you guys would say, unranked and not matter, or highest ranked and matter, when you can look at everybody at an equal playing field and give them the respect that they're going out there and getting their head punched in for us to entertain, then watch them, learn about them, learn their techniques and how each technique fits together, and speak on their behalf because they don't have a microphone. I've been the guy that's in there getting my head punched, and the other person who's got the microphone has no idea what I'm doing. And they say that they do, but they don't because they didn't watch any film, and it's clear. I made a point when my knees were blown out that I can make a difference in the sport for not just the sport, but for the athletes. So who can you make a difference for would be the question to be in if you want to get into this.
Dominick, you touched on it with your injuries and everything else, and I appreciate your answer. I have always wanted to ask, sports, there's always a lot of what ifs. What if this didn't happen? What if that? I guess at what point did you stop maybe asking yourself, what if I had never gotten hurt?
I guess you don't really ask that when you're in my position. You kind of just got to take what's given to you, right? That's what life is about. I mean, without trying to sound honestly, I don't try to sound philosophical. This is just the way it is. Like when bad things happen to you, you can either keep moving with them or you can resist them. And what's resistance going to do for you in the end? So it just happened. And like I said, I turned lemons into lemonade. I found a way that I could make a difference for other people. And when I did that, it created opportunities for not just myself, but look, the sport's growing. There's more knowledge out there. People know more about this sport than ever before. DC is a very good commentator as well, and he's giving analytical breakdowns of the wrestling stuff that he was in the Olympic trials and all that stuff. Like, he did Olympian stuff in wrestling. So you got him up there talking. You got me up there talking, multiple-time world champion. When that happens, the sport evolves. And so that's giving back to the sport.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it, Dom.
Mm-hmm.
Dominick, you just received the coveted jacket, USADA jacket. What are your thoughts on that? Because to even get that, you have to have a lot of longevity in the sport in and of itself, and then come out on the other side clean.
Yeah, it's pretty honorable. I'm just glad that, I don't look at it as a thing because it's just how I've been doing the sport. You don't really think of it as a big deal. And when USADA makes it a big deal, I think that kind of just shows, it does two things to me. It says either USADA really wants the promotion, or, which is okay. I mean, that's what this world's about, is promotion, right? I mean, or it also tells me that there's a lot of dirty fighters in other organizations, in other sports. I mean, we're popping guys like TJ Dillashaw in my division, in my sport, after I fought him, So it's like they're still trying to use some people. And everybody's trying to cut corners the best they can sometimes, I stood after after TJ Dillashaw popped and said, I feel bad for him because of this. And we've had guys like John Jones pop, and they reversed the claims, USADA. They reversed the claims on guys like other people. Like they've reversed the claims and said, oh, actually, we're going to cut the sentence down. He's not guilty. Jessica Penny, they reversed the charges, and now her name is tainted. So it can go both ways with USADA. They can blame you right away and make you guilty and make an example out of you, and then take it back, and now you're guilty for the rest of your career too. So I think it's good when they're bringing positive light to the testing, because it's not always positive for all fighters. I'm blessed that it's been positive for me. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm scared of USADA. You don't know what they could do to you. They could, people. Not everybody's been completely dirty. I don't think Jessica Penny is not. She'll be reinstated back into the UFC and she did not break any protocols. That's been proven now in court. So what does that do to her, that poor girl? You know what I'm saying? I'm grateful that it's gone a positive way for me. I'm very grateful for that. I look at it like, whoo, thank God.
Do you think there should be more burden of proof on USADA's side before?
Absolutely. Yes. Nothing should be stated until the court case is finished, because once it's outed on media, you're guilty until proven innocent. You're not innocent until proven guilty when it comes to USADA terms. So that's the one adjustment that I would say should definitely be made on our part as fighters. You can't be saying that we're guilty before they go through the case. That doesn't make sense to me.
Any funny instances? Because there's a lot of invasion on your guys' lives where you have to report where you are, and they can come at any time to test you. Any funny instances of being tested or whatever?
So I'm waking up at 6 in the morning, and I got the morning ritual for men every now and then happens. I'll let you guys piece that together yourself. And I'm in my robe, and I'm just not happy because it's like, come on, man, it's 6:30 in the morning. You had to come at 6:30 in the morning. And I open the door, and I'm in my robe, and I got a guy who's there to take my blood and a guy who's there to take my piss, and I'm standing there with Pedro at full attention, for lack of a better term. And I said, is this really how you wanted to see me in the morning? You had to come at 6:30 in the morning? You couldn't come a little bit later? Is there a possibility we could move this back to 8 o'clock or something, please? And they never came at 6:30 ever again.
So they listened.
They listened, and I'm appreciative. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
When I heard you talk about the process of becoming an announcer and throwing you into a room and just kind of letting you figure it out, How difficult is for somebody like you that's at the top of your sport, at the top of your game, has achieved so much to kind of like go to square one in another profession and kind of, throw the ego out and just say, I need to learn something here?
Yeah, you nailed it, throwing the ego out. But it's easy to throw the ego out if you're doing it for somebody else, right? If I'm doing it for me, then it's like, well, I should be here, I should be there, I should be at the top right off the bat. If you're doing it for the fighter, then you need to learn from the basics, right? So I focus on, I'm there for the fighters. I'm here to speak on behalf of the fighters. I am a fighter. I know what it's like getting socked in the head. So when you come from that place, you can say, okay, let me step back and know that I don't know anything about TV when I started. And nothing. I'd never done this. And so I came from a very humble mindset. And Zach Candido worked with me and molded me and helped me get a lot better over the years. And now I know I'm one of the best, if not the best commentator in the world, especially in the sport. So I'm positive of that. And I'm grateful that the learning is starting early with an open mindset. It's called a beginner's mindset. When you can come from that at all times, that's mastery.
And how much has that kind of seeing fights from a different perspective maybe helped you in your continued development to break down what other guys are trying to do, to try to see it in that way, and then to bring that into your own career?
I'll be honest, sometimes it's catastrophic. It's called analysis to paralysis. I've said this on a couple interviews. And the key to being in the state of flow is not being in the future, not being in the past, being right in the present where nothing exists and you just feel your own body and you're just there. When you're an analyst, all that other noise is constantly knocking on your door. And so it's actually a trick that you gotta it's like a switch you kind of get to turn off. So it's been nice to be able to, that's why you haven't seen me on TV a lot. You haven't seen me doing a lot of interviews, because I've been trying to focus on being in the present and not turning on that analyst switch. I did one a month ago because you got to make money. I'm not going to lie. But that was the only reason, was to get it. I needed to get a paycheck in there. If I had a choice, I wouldn't have done that, but I needed to make some money, and so I did it. But and I'm grateful for that opportunity that I get that. Again, thank the Lord for that. But yeah, it's definitely something you got to turn off, man.
San Diego's expensive, so
Life's expensive, and fighting doesn't pay a lot. Not all the time.
Well, and I mean, speaking of that, it's better now than it was when you started, obviously.
It's a million times better. Listen, the UFC is taking, I started in the WEC before there was this weight class. This weight class did not exist. The UFC has leaps and bounds improved. It started with Fox Sports by Dana White and them getting us on Fox Sports. That opened the eyes to everybody, which opened the gates for money to come in for us. And I'm very grateful for how things have grown. I mean, just driving here, I got picked up in my own car. I have my own meals set at my door. I got people bringing water to my door. I don't know if it's partially COVID too, I think has really forced everybody to get their ish together, for lack of a better term, to really get ahead and take care of us. But also, they don't have to do it. And I got my own room, I got my own bubble. It's safe. I feel very well taken care of by the UFC more than ever. They're improving.
Well, all these things have taken place. You talked about earlier what it was like. John McCain saying it's human cockfighting, and that he's the senator from where you come from. And now to where it's grown, how proud are you to have been a part of that and to be part of building what this is today?
I mean, I'm proud. It's cool. It's you don't expect it. When you're in it, you're just in it, But now where I'm at, 16 years fighting and about 20 years competing, more than that probably. I need to write a book. It's crazy. Things are nuts. The journey has been insane.
And the last thing I have for you is that you haven't dealt with a whole lot of losses in your career. It's not fortunately hasn't happened very much. But when you fight and claw to get back into the cage, it takes those 3 years between fights, and then it's a loss at the end. How difficult is that to kind of process as compared to just a normal loss? If you just had you fought 3 months ago, you fight again.
I think what made it harder was the way it was. You don't even see the end of that fight because it looks so controversial. If you go to the replay, they show the kick landing, but they don't show the end of the fight. They don't show the ref pulling anybody off me. They don't show any of that. Why is that? It's not good for TV. And it's not good for anybody because it was a bullshit stoppage. But that's beside the fact. It's done. It's an L on my record. I've moved beyond that. I've taken responsibility for it so that I could learn from it. What's next? What's next is getting back in there, getting back on my feet like I've always done and doing the best I can. I've had a full training camp. Since that, I never got off the tracks. That person that won got off the tracks because the heat was heavy at the top. Let me tell you, I know what the heat's like at the top. It's you got Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan staring at you, talking to you on the internet. That's those guys. To be a champion right now is one of the toughest things in the world. To be a champion ever is the toughest thing in the world. To keep the championship is harder than that.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.